What if I told you that 58% of employees are walking into work every day thinking they don't deserve to be there? That's 68% of women and 73% of black and brown employees are hearing voices in their heads saying they don't want to hear what you have to say. I'm Ryan Kohler, and this is Talent Talks. Emily is diving deep into one of the most uncomfortable topics in leadership, imposter syndrome. And she's talking with John Little, founder of Winner's Edge Coaching, who's developed a framework that's going to change how you think about confidence in the workplace. Here's what blew my mind. Imposter syndrome isn't just an individual problem, it's an organizational crisis. John's right when he says the people struggling with it are impacting everything at the organization. And here's the kicker: it shows up most in high achievers who've been promoted from individual contributors to leadership roles. So here's what we're unpacking. John's Embrace framework that breaks down exactly how to combat imposter syndrome step by step. Why accountability is actually the highest form of kindness when done right. And his simple but brilliant technique: name it, tame it, reframe it. If you've ever felt like you're faking it till you make it, or you're leading people who seem to shut down in meetings, this conversation is going to give you the tools to transform that dynamic completely. Let's dive in.
Well, thank you for joining us this morning for another episode of Talent Talks. I'm your host, Emily, and I am joined today by John Little. I'm very excited to have you on the show this morning, John. John is joining us all the way from Florida. He is the founder and CEO of the Winner's Edge Coaching. And he is also the developer of an awesome framework that I totally love. It's called the Embrace framework that we're going to get into more in the show. But I'm really excited to talk to you this morning, John, about a topic you did at SHRM recently on imposter syndrome. So welcome to the
Yeah.
show, and thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Emily. Happy to be here. Excited to have this conversation around what's really an important topic.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us and our audience, John, a little bit about yourself, about your background. You and I connected really well the first time we talked about like emotional intelligence and thought leadership, real thought leadership,
Right.
none of the sugarcoating stuff. And so tell us about your background, about yourself, and kind of what brought you into this awesome framework and the topic and all of the tie-ins to this.
Yeah, thank you. So my way that I always describe my background is I've had a bit of a career jungle gym, working in industries from, right out of college. I worked in sports media for 10 years and then made a hard shift into banking and into, more of a corporate structure, and
Right.
have done a lot of work through consulting and working at a large global real estate and development and management firm, and then into coaching. Kind of my one through line has always been leadership. In every
Right.
role that I've had some level of leadership, whether it's being a supervisor of a small team or a leader of a larger team. That's been the one thing that I've always connected with, which leads me to the work that I do today. Because uh,
Sure.
the most valuable thing for me is seeing people grow. And when I see people grow, either through learning something, if I'm teaching a workshop or a seminar and I see the light bulb come on with somebody, or through the experience of working with them, I see them gain more confidence and I see them being able to move forward in their career, not just by title, but just in the work that they do. Those are the things that really bring me a lot of satisfaction. And so that's been really my focus for 25 or so years. As you may see, I've got some wisdom down here. So I've seen a thing or two, I've done a thing or two, but really the importance for me is seeing people grow. And that did feed into the Embrace framework and the imposter syndrome that pops up, which I know we're going to talk a lot about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think imposter syndrome is such a fascinating psychological, I guess, phenomenon that happens in a human, right? I
Yeah.
mean, we it has a lot to do with insecurity, it has a lot to do with community, which like how we're being perceived amongst groups of people, right? And how we're being
Hmm.
validated. Um
Right.
and what a lot of people I think forget too is that it exists probably primarily in leadership, I would think.
Absolutely.
Right? And so
Yeah.
we a lot of times question ourselves as leaders, which can um lead to some really interesting behaviors in the workplace
Yeah.
that are not always healthy. And can then impact our relationships, right, with people that are maybe our subordinates or that report directly into us or that we have to work alongside even as our peers. And
Yeah.
so I'm excited to get into that because there's a really interesting psychology that happens behind imposter syndrome. So, John, tell me about your work in this area. How did you get into talking about imposter syndrome, and what would be kind of your definition of it? Like what have you seen as far as the definition of this? Because I know it can take many forms.
Yeah. So the way that I really define imposter syndrome, it's those thoughts or those voices in the back of your head that are telling you either situationally, if you're in a situation that you have to step up or speak up, that tell you they don't want to hear what you have to say. Or if you say something that doesn't land, then what's that going to do to your credibility? Are people going to think that you deserve to be here? Are people going to buy into you? Are people going to continue to want to follow you? So imposter syndrome. It's all of those doubts that creep up that tell you that you shouldn't be here, that
Right.
nobody is interested in what you have to say, or that you have such a thin margin for error that if you say anything that's wrong, then you're going to be harshly judged and criticized for it. And so when all of those thoughts continue to happen, when you continue to hear those insecurities, when you continue to hear those doubts, then yeah, you start to feel as though that you're an imposter. You start to
Right.
feel as though someone else should be in this seat. You start to feel like I don't deserve this. And that can manifest itself in so many different ways. If kind of the two extremes are you have people that will shut down
Right.
because they feel as though that if they speak up, then they're going to be harshly judged. Or you see people overcorrect and you see, leaders acting toxically and they're, the fake it till you make it to an extreme.
Right.
So they're overcompensating for their fears, trying to mask those insecurities. Neither one
Right.
of those are healthy. they're
No,
both
not at
tough
all.
spaces to be in.
Yeah.
But and yeah, so it is. That's the way that I describe it. And the reason that I got into it is because I saw it so many times. I saw it so many times working with leaders. Is that the fears and the concerns that they had, and you said it perfectly, Emily. It shows up the most in people who have achieved. It shows up the
Right.
most in people who have grown, and kind of the seeds of that are when you're an individual contributor. It's easy for you to feel confident in the things you're doing
Right.
because the stakes are a little bit lower. You're only really influencing and impacting your kind of small circle of either yourself or maybe a couple people around you. As an individual contributor, it's easy to feel confident. When you get moved up into a mid to senior level leadership role, you're no longer being measured on your individual work. You
Right.
now are in a space where you have to be strategic, where you have to be visionary, where you have to be thoughtful, and there's often no training to help you move from A to B in those roles. So that's why people who are in those leadership roles, people who are high achievers, have high levels of imposter syndrome because I've always been successful. I've always been able to do. And now that I can't do, I feel lost.
Right. Well, and I think it's interesting too, and a lot of it too probably even predates any kind of workplace interaction, right? It would
Oh yeah.
date all the way back to how we were raised, right? And what
Right.
happens in our childhood, and things like that. I mean, I know people who are told their whole lives you're going to grow up to be, you know, this big deal, right? You're going to be a
Right.
big fish. You're going to be a millionaire. You're going to be the creator of some big deal thing. You're going to change the world. And then they hear that and hear that and hear that and hear that and hear that. And then when it doesn't happen exactly like that, it's like you're saying, it's either
Yeah.
I retreat into some sort of self-deprecation and I don't feel good about myself because I didn't achieve what these high bars were that were set for me throughout my entire life, or
hmm
I overcompensate and I become, for lack of better terms, a jerk and I
Right.
become difficult to deal with because I don't want anybody to hone in on that insecurity that I have. And what's interesting is in my career, I've seen this a bunch of times, and I'm sure I've struggled with it. I'm more the retreat into my own shell type than lash
hmm
out type. But I've seen it primarily with women in the workplace. Um, and I know traditionally we see it with like women or minority groups or like, groups that traditionally maybe have had to fight harder, so to speak, or have had to
Right.
show up in more creative ways or in more robust ways to get ahead or noticed than maybe their counterparts have. But I've also seen it just across the board, even in people that have maybe graduated from college and come in and think that they know better than people who have been doing a job for 20 years that didn't go to college but have had like industry experience and know because they've done it with their hands. Um,
Right.
and so it's an interesting psychology there, but I think it always comes down to, am I good enough? Are they going to listen and like me and appreciate what I
Hmm.
have to say? And do I belong here? Do I
Yeah.
belong? You know,
So you brought up a couple of really interesting things. So let me throw some numbers at you. So this was a
sure.
study done in 2022. It was a study of U.S. employees. 58% of employees have said that they experience imposter syndrome in the workplace. Of that 58%, I'm sorry, not of that 58%, in addition to that 58%, 68% of women say that they experience imposter syndrome, right? So to your point, it's
Mhm.
higher than the
Yeah.
benchmark. Black and brown employees, 73%. Right now, there's a
Yeah.
number of reasons for that. I think one of the biggest reasons that that happens is because there is the whether it's an expectation, whether it's an experience, whether it's a perception, but we even see it with job applications that women and people from minority communities
Right.
feel the need to be extra perfect
Yes.
because they have to there's a higher bar that they're higher standard that they feel
Right.
that they have to meet in order to be level. So that's where that imposter syndrome comes from as well, is like I have to do so much more, or I feel like I have to do so much more to just get to the same place. I grew up hearing at the dinner table all the time, you have to work twice as hard to get half as far. Twice as hard to get half as far. And so that's just always been my mindset, is that I
Right.
know that I don't have my margin for error is much smaller than other, whether that's real or perceived, but that's what I bring to whatever work that I do, is that
Right.
I can't, I used to joke years ago, it was partial joke, but part reality. Like, I wish that I had the space to be mediocre. Like, how refreshing would it be
Right.
to think I can just be mediocre?
Just
That's
for
not
like
an
a couple,
option.
like a day here and there. Yeah.
Right.
Once in a
Exactly.
while. Yeah.
Yeah. But I know that that's not a space where I find confidence in. I find
Right.
confidence in knowing that I've done more than somebody else. That I
Right.
not that I've accomplished more on my resume, but like I put the work in. I put the effort in.
Right.
I've done the education. I've done the training. I've read the book. Like I know that I have those things. But
Sure.
if I didn't have that knowledge, and I also done a lot of space in emotional intelligence and self awareness, so if I hadn't done that work, I absolutely would suffer from imposter syndrome in some of the
Right.
spaces that I go into and some of the stages that I speak on. I mean, I did a presentation earlier this year for a group of, it was an association of training and development. So it was
Yeah.
basically a community of my peers. Right before I got on the call, I've been doing this for years. Right before I got on that call, I was like, they're not going to listen to me. Like they they're going to be judging every single slide. They're going to be judging every word that I say. I can't stumble. I can't stutter. I can't get all of those things happened in my head in the
Yeah.
flow. But that's the
Exactly.
imposter syndrome that came up because I know that this is a group that has the same capabilities as I do. And
Right.
so that was kind of a space where I was like, ugh, but I
Right.
quickly was able to move past it. But you're right. Yeah, Emily, that is a big challenge. And recognizing that, the people who we're working with, they're bringing all of those things, they're bringing all that. I don't want to call it baggage because it's more so it's experience, it's knowledge, it's perspective, but they're bringing all of those things to the interactions that you have with them, to the workplace.
Right.
All those things come with them. So being aware of that, if you're a leader working with people, or if it's something you're struggling with yourself, just recognizing that all those things are present as you're having interactions with people.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a good point that we remember as practitioners or as thought leadership or consultants of human resources, right? The human part of that, like we're dealing with human beings.
Right.
And with something like imposter syndrome, to me, this goes back to, like I said, a psychology of not being good enough,
Hmm.
potentially not being good enough, disappointing people, because that's where we're drawing some sort of validation from. And
Right.
validation that I know what I'm talking about. Like to your point, I read the books, I did the research, I studied the subject matter. I am a proficient expert in this to get up in front of
Hmm.
my group of peers and colleagues and talk about this as an expert. I don't want to disappoint these people. And if I screw up, they're going to know. I'm not
Right.
like, I'm not going to be like, pulling anybody's leg up here that, if I
Right.
screw up, they're going to know. But the thing is, it comes down to some sort of deeper psychological connection to something else. And I would argue that everybody, I don't care who you are, has some sort of trauma in their past. You would not be a
Some
human
level.
if you did not.
Hmm.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be some like catastrophic trauma either. It could be some level of trauma. Hell, we come into the planet, into our lives in trauma. The act of birth is traumatic. But
Yes.
like we all come into this, we have trauma of some kind, and it when we're dealing with people, that level of trauma, depending upon what it is, could be feeding into some level of imposter syndrome. And so we need to be sensitive to that. And I think giving our leadership and even just our employees in general some grace when they are getting up and speaking or they are presenting in some sort of subject matter, um, and being able to give them the attention and the validation, because it is difficult enough to get up and talk about these things and have
Yeah.
these conversations. But these like peer driven groups, I did this a lot in my career. Like I would have my people in my teams like get up and like present on different topics in front of their peers to help
Right.
get over imposter syndrome, because it
Right.
was like you have a right to be here. And
Absolutely.
you have a valid thing. It's almost kind of like a mastermind like mentality that like if everybody gathers in a room together, everybody's like an expert in something and they'll teach
Right.
you, like everybody will teach somebody something. But it's to get over that idea that like you're not valid in some way or what you have to say
Right.
is not good enough, which segues really beautifully into your embrace framework, which I'm really excited to talk about. I love this framework, beside it
Oh,
having
thank
an
you.
awesome acronym, which is the Embrace. Great for a great acronym, right? But it yeah, it's great framework and it's simple
I appreciate
framework,
it.
which is important because execution is difficult when we're dealing with humans, or it's messy,
Right.
I should say. And so the framework's got to be simple because the execution is not, in my opinion. Um,
Exactly.
so go over your embrace framework because this framework is awesome and I love it. So let's talk a little bit about this and how you've developed this map into a way to really drive leadership forward when they're thinking about how to deal with employees and just people in the organization in general, because it really is more organizational value-based framework.
Yeah, and thank you for teeing that up. This was one of the big ahas that I had, probably a year or so ago, and I've been
Yeah.
spending a lot of time researching imposter syndrome. And one of the things that I started to recognize in the conversations that I was having and some of the data that I was looking at is that imposter syndrome is not just an individual thing, but it truly is an organizational
Yeah,
crisis.
it's a group community
It
thing.
is,
Yeah.
right, because it's the individuals that are struggling with it that then
Yep.
impact everything at the organization. So
Yes.
I had already been working on this embrace framework, and I was like, it all kind of comes together. So what the embrace framework is, it's an acronym. And the first, I'll kind of walk through step by
Yeah.
step, if that's okay. The
Yeah.
first E in embrace framework is empathy. And empathy, as we know, for leaders is so key, so important. It's being able for us to be able to kind of walk the steps of someone else and recognize where they are in a moment, not to feel sorry for them, but to feel
Mhm.
with them. So that way you can
Yes.
help to guide and support them through where whatever it is that they're encountering or experiencing that time. But it's also self empathy, and
Yeah.
that's something that as individuals we tend to ignore. We tend to not think about the fact that we have to give ourselves grace and space. And so with empathy, I always encourage individuals to give yourself the grace that you would give someone else. Like,
Hmm.
you need to show yourself empathy and recognize that yeah, I mean, I'm struggling right now. There's another framework that I kind of start with sometimes with someone who's really in the throes of imposter syndrome, which is name it, tame it, and reframe it.
Hmm.
So, like, identify what it is that you're struggling with. And when you can identify it, then you can kind of call it out for what it is. So maybe I'm struggling to speak up in a meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, so now I can name that that's something that is this challenging me. Now I can tame it by saying, I'm supposed to be in that meeting. I'm supposed to be there.
Take
People
ownership.
have asked me to be there. Right.
Yep.
Take ownership, and then reframe it as the next time I speak in this meeting, it's going to be an opportunity for me to share what I know and also to get feedback. Right.
Yep.
So it's just those simple processes that we do. Again, it's simple, but it's not easy. Right.
Yeah. I tell my
But
kids that all
that's
the time. I'm like, you
yeah,
don't say I have to be here. Say I get to be here.
absolutely
It's that kind of thing. Yeah.
right.
Totally.
Yeah, and that actually, Emily, takes me to the M, the next part of the framework, which is mindset. The mindset that you bring to whether it is yourself, whether it's you as a leader, whether it's leading a team, having that mindset of growth, having that mindset of compassion, having that mindset of vulnerability, having the mindset of I want to show up as my best self all the time, and also when you layer in the empathy, so recognize that you're going to get grace for not being perfect, which then allows you to have a mindset of I'm going to continue to try to show up, be my best self every single day, recognizing that I'm not going to be perfect, but I'm just going to keep showing up. I'm going to keep
Yes.
showing up that way and keep showing up for my team, keep showing up for myself, keep showing up for my company. And that just that mindset, that those mantras, it's so easy for you to get shifted or pushed or nudged into a negative space from a mindset standpoint. So being super intentional about keeping a positive mindset will help you to stay focused and stay encouraged. So when you have your empathy, you have the mindset. The other thing that I want you to do is I want you to think about what's your brand as a leader. And that's what that B is in the Embrace framework. And that brand is not your social media brand. That brand is not, the brands that you wear, the brands that you
Right.
carry. It's not that. Your brand is really tied to your legacy and how
Yes.
you want people to experience you and how you want people to describe you when you're not around. Like when we think about the brands that are out there, the famous brands, Coca-Cola, Delta Airlines, Chick-fil-A, whatever. When you think about those brands, you immediately think what it is to have those experiences, good and bad, right?
Right.
So I mentioned some of the good brands. I won't mention some of the bad brands because you may want to be sponsored one day. But we also know when we hear certain brands, we're like,
Right.
yeah, no, I'm good. Right. So
Absolutely.
that happens personally as well. So individually, think about what are your values and how do your values support your brand. So the values that I use to support my brand are kind, caring, consistent, and outcome oriented.
Right.
So anybody who I interact with, whether it be someone who I'm coaching, whether it be someone who I just, whether it's someone who's the clerk, the checkout clerk at the grocery store, whether it's, a friend or family member, like I want them to be able to say that I was kind, caring, consistent, and outcome oriented. It doesn't have to be all four of those, but at
Right.
least one of those. That's how I present because that's my brand, right?
Right.
It's not manipulated. That's who genuinely I am.
Right.
But that also helps me be confident in those spaces where imposter syndrome may creep up. Because the clearer that I am about my brand and about my values and how I want people to experience me, if I lean into that, then leaning into that allows me to feel confident that I'm showing up as my best self,
Yeah.
right? And kind of tying what we've talked about already, right? I'm already going to give myself grace through empathy. I'm already going to have the mindset to show up as my best self. I'm going to be intentional about my brand and how I represent myself being aligned to my values. So I'll kind of stop there to see if you have any questions before kind of going into the rest of the framework.
No, I think it's brilliant. And I mean, to kind of sum this up from an organization or an org standpoint, to break it down from, the leading with empathy to mindset, I mean, really with leadership and with just hiring, if we take like hiring in general, because I mean, you and I kind of talked about this when we just chatted. I believe we have a sourcing, recruiting, hiring, it kind of starts at the beginning of the, situation, ground level. But
Absolutely.
I think when it comes to brand and legacy, we think about this from individual standpoint, but we also think about it from an organizational standpoint. And I know from
Mm-hmm.
working in an industry like premium denim manufacturing, we would sell jeans for sometimes $200-300 a pair, right?
Right.
And the manufacturing process for something like that, the craft that has to go into something like that is very intensive just for one garment. And you to be able to maintain a reputation of having the best fit and the best cut and the best wash and the best this and the best that, you have to maintain that consistency and you have to maintain that passion in that craft and not be compromising in those values. And so for me, the first three really come down to I've got to not only as an organization and as a leadership have to really know what my values as an organization are and be living
Right.
those values. Like I need to have them clearly defined. I need to know what they are. I need to be
Mm-hmm.
driving them from the top down, and I need to be living them and producing them not only in the organization within the four walls of the building or the whatever you want to call it, but what I'm projecting out into the world, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And my employees or my people that work for my organization need to be as individuals, as an individual ecosystem, embracing, not to but they need to be fostering that same sense of value driven action and
Absolutely.
forward thinking in order to be a member of whatever that organization is to be successful there. Because if not,
Yeah.
you're going to start seeing the well get poisoned very
Right.
quickly just in those first three. You can't really have the other four if those first three are not intact, in my
Absolutely.
opinion. So
Yeah. I,
then the next four makes sense, but only if those first three are really solid.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I remember we talked about on the,
Yeah.
we talked before, the values conversation and
Yeah.
the alignment between an individual's personal values and the company's values, and also how those values need to start before someone even is hired on,
Right.
is finding that alignment. But if your talent acquisition process isn't grounded in your values, then how are you going to get people in the organization that have those
Right.
values?
Right.
There was a gentleman who I worked with, Dr. Bill Walker, one of my favorite people that I worked with. Brilliant dude. And he would always talk about when we would share conversations around values and work with leaders around values. He would say, "You have to make sure that the words on the wall are lived down the hall."
Yep.
And just every time he would say that, it would just resonate so deeply with me. And a lot of work that I did with organizations earlier this year was around activating your core values in your organization and tying
Yeah.
behaviors to those values, because that's your brand. That
Yes.
is your brand.
Yes.
And if you're not doing those things, then your brand is all over the place. And
Yeah.
it's again kind of taking it back to the talent acquisition process. It doesn't matter how great you think you are. If the public perception is that that's a terrible place to work, then you're going to get people who are coming to work for a paycheck. They're not
Yeah.
coming to work because they're there and they're committed. They're coming to work because you're paying them to be there.
Right.
I don't want to work with people who are just compliant. I
Right.
want to work with people who are compelled. I want
Right.
to work with people who are committed to being there. So
Right.
yeah, without those first three, it's really hard to accomplish anything great.
Yeah, and I'm gonna butcher this quote, and I can't remember who said it. It was a woman that said it too. She said something in hiring or talent acquisition. She said something along the lines of, your customers first, oh no, your employees or your candidate's first impression of a business is also your employees or your customer's first impression of a business.
Yeah.
Makes absolute sense, right?
Yep.
Because
Yep.
if you're trying to hire for people to come work for your organization, you are essentially trying to target your customer.
Right. By proxy or by by direct application. Yeah.
Right. So whatever you put out better match the values because that's the type of person you're trying to attract. So essentially you're trying to attract your customer and your customer's values are the, what you're trying to attract to come and, be interested in your organization because of your values and who you are. And so that should be the same principle in which you're trying to attract your talent.
Right.
I mean, hello.
It seems so simple,
Seems so
and yet
simple, but it's not. I mean, it's not. There's an art to this. But
absolutely.
yeah, and so I mean, yeah, that resilience is the next one, which I think is kind of we're talking about this now. Like this is pressure tested, right?
Yeah, resilience is one of those things that's your backbone. That's the strength that you need when hard times come. So I didn't say if, I said when, because hard times will come, and those
Yes.
hard times can look and feel very different for different people. But that resilience that you have, which is again going to lean into a lot of times your values and your brand, when you are faced with those tough times, you lean into the things that give you strength. And so resilience can look a couple of different ways. Resilience can look like you standing up for yourself. Resilience can look like you having a principled approach to the work that you do.
Right.
Resilience can look like respectfully pushing back with things that you don't agree on. And
Mhm.
that's kind of taking it back full circle to imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that I see so frequently with people who are struggling with imposter syndrome is they do things that they don't agree with, or they're afraid to respectfully challenge, or they're afraid to innovate
Mhm.
because of the fear of how that's going to be perceived. But
Right.
that's why you're in the room. Like, you did become an individual contributor success story by playing things safe, by
Right.
doing things exactly the way that everybody else did them. That's not how you stood out.
Right.
So when you get into a leadership role and you're no longer willing to stand out, you're no longer willing to challenge things, you're not really no longer willing to do things differently because you're afraid of how it may be perceived, then you end up not only hurting yourself but the organization. So that's why resilience is important, because resilience kind of gives you that strength to move forward, gives you the building blocks for confidence. But also, circling back to the earlier parts of the embrace framework, it's not always going to go great. Give
No.
yourself some grace.
Yes.
Have that mindset. I'm going to show up tomorrow. I'm going to keep showing up as my best self. And what are my values? What's my
Yes.
brand? What are the things that I know that I can count on?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and especially if you're in the situation where you're dealing with as a middle manager or maybe even a lower level employee or an entry level employee, you might be an innovator, right? You
Right.
might be dealing with leadership that has imposter syndrome, and that's a difficult thing because you could be trying to approach leadership that you have ideas and you have this and you have that. This has happened to me. And they're like, we don't
Hmm.
want to hear from you because I don't want you to outshine me, or I don't want you to,
Absolutely.
and so there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot that can happen and being that's why it's so important to be true to yourself and be resilient in your ideas and your thoughts and
Hmm.
understand that anybody that's listening to this that is dealing with imposter syndrome, either that has it or that is dealing with someone that has it in the
Right.
workplace, um, you need to be resilient, but don't take
Hmm.
abuse. Like,
Right.
don't take any shit either. Like,
Right.
the old adage about turning the other cheek, like sometimes you got to turn the other cheek and walk the hell away because you don't just want to get, backhanded like over and over again. But I mean,
Exactly.
this is, if you're living your life in accordance with the values of your organization and you have these ideas and you're bringing these to the table, um, be resilient in that because that is not your problem and it's not your fault
Exactly.
either.
Hmm.
Which leads us to accountability, right? There's a major part of this. Accountability, I think, is the hardest one for a lot of people.
Yeah.
for a number of reasons. Because first of all, it takes a level of self-awareness, right? Which
Right.
is difficult. And then, with imposter syndrome, it's tough because I think some people don't even realize they have it
Right.
when they
Right.
have it. And so it becomes everybody else's fault,
Mm-hmm.
easier to blame or project onto others. And so accountability can be difficult, especially if you have a personality where you get activated really easily, right?
Right.
So talk about
So
accountability.
yeah. So let me reframe this a little bit for you,
Yeah.
because accountability, when it's done right, is the highest form of kindness.
Yes.
And a lot of
Agreed.
times when you say that to people, they're like, what are you talking about? Accountability is, it feels like conflict. Accountability means that something is wrong. Accountability means that someone's coming down on me. But that's not what accountability truly
No, not
is.
at all. No.
What accountability is when you have a clear understanding, when you have clarity on the expectations of what's expected of you, what's expected of others, when you have communicated that back and forth, when you have conversations or you have documentation, whether it be, SOPs, whether it be
Yeah.
KPIs, whatever it is, whatever metric it is that you're using to measure it. And then here's the piece that's often missed. Before the work begins, you getting confirmation that we're both on the
Yes.
same
Agreement.
page.
Yes. We
Yes,
understand
agreement.
each other.
Right. That's
Yes.
the piece that is missing a lot of times with accountability, because then once we have those three things, we have clarity of expectations, we have a way of communicating what those expectations are, and then we have agreement, or we have confirmation. Then anything that we need to have a conversation around accountability is a lot easier, because now we have exactly what we're talking about. And it usually is one of three issues. It's either a competence issue, meaning that I don't really have the information that I need, or I don't have the knowledge that I need. I can coach on that. Is it a
Yeah.
confidence issue? I don't think I can do it. I've never done it before. I can coach on that. Or
Yeah.
is it a commitment issue? Like,
Right.
yeah, I don't want to do that. Well, I can coach you on that too. It's just going
Yeah.
to be some different coaching. But
Yes.
that's the way that accountability is so easy to do when it's done right. But a
Yes.
lot of times what people will do is they'll jump right to compliance and correction. And when
Yep.
you're using that as levers of accountability, then we're missing the mark. And those are the things that double down on imposter syndrome, because
Right.
someone could come out of one of those conversations thinking, I, okay, I don't even know where to start. But all
And
I
I'm
know is
already a
that
failure before I even started.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know where to start. I'm already a failure and I just got chewed out. So, like, now what? And
Yeah.
that leads to that paralysis by analysis. And so,
Yeah.
again, from that, from the standpoint of imposter syndrome being an organizational crisis, when you have leaders that are holding people accountability through fear, control, and command, then you're just doubling down on all of those things that are going to make it so much harder for you to have accountability. So, accountability done right is a big part of the Embrace framework. And as an individual, I need to be accountable, and
Yes.
I need to be accountable not only for myself, but for the people that I'm leading. And also, accountability is a two-way street. I
Yes.
have to be able to build and establish the trust within my team that they can hold me accountable too. And I'll
Absolutely.
share a story from when I was leading a team, and we had to make a pretty significant shift with responsibilities and travel responsibilities. And this was me not showing up as my best self. This was me being kind of transactional in the moment, moving quickly,
Right.
talking to one of my team members. And I told her, it's like, okay, we're making this shift. Like, your territory is moving from basically your backyard to a part of your backyard and a larger neighborhood 4 streets away. Right.
Right.
It was a couple of states away, but just
Right. Right.
for the
Yeah.
sake of the analogy.
Sure.
Um, and I just kind of like said it and like moved on. And so in our next one-on-one, she said to me, she was like, John, I didn't really, I was really surprised in the way that was communicated. It didn't really land very well with me, because there's a number of considerations that I don't know were thought of when that decision was made.
Right.
And she was dead right to hold me accountable for that, because
Sure.
the reality was we had thought about a lot of those things and we had some of those conversations. When I say we, I mean me and the other leaders at the organization, but we didn't have the
Not
conversations
her.
with her.
Hmm.
And when I delivered it, I just delivered the outcome.
Right.
Right. if
Yeah.
she didn't, if we didn't have the relationship, for her to be able to hold me accountable for that, that could have damaged our ability to work together. And so when she told me that, I was like, you're 100% right. I completely dropped the ball on that. I'm sorry. What information do you need in order for you to feel comfortable moving forward, in order for you to feel comfortable with the strategy? Or are there things that we need to think about before we implement it? Right.
Right.
That was me being accountable because we were able to have the conversation. But as her quote unquote boss, on paper, like, should she be holding me accountable? Some people
Sure.
may think no, but in reality, absolutely, because accountability is a two-way street. How could I then be expected to be holding her accountable for things if she couldn't have the same conversation with me?
Right. Yeah, I totally agree with you. We have to, our doors as leaders need to be open to that, and our employees and our team members' experiences, right? And what they're going through, before we, like you said, kind of like make a decision for them on their behalf, or consider something that we think they should do or should be good for them on their behalf.
Hmm.
Accountability, when it comes to where I've seen organizations just fall flat on their face with this almost every time, is they try to put metrics and
Right.
performance indicators in place and things like that that are not really measurable in any significant way, or they're not
Hmm.
based on anything that you can gauge any sort of true improvement on. And there's no, it's a, it's almost a bias based like scale of, like it's based on the manager or the boss's opinion of
Right.
where that employee is at. And that's, you cannot do that. Like, it needs to be
No.
measurable, it needs to be based on fact. You need to be able to show either improvement or lack of improvement, or stagnant whatever movement during a certain period of time. And like you said, accountability is about open-ended conversation, ability to have comfortability about talking, and having open dialogue. I have that
Right.
with my current, boss, and I've had that for 7 years with him. Like, we can talk about things, and that's important. It's the same with me. My door is always open. I expect my people to tell me when I'm not doing something correctly.
Right.
If not, I'm not
Yep.
growing as a human. My amigo's not my amigo, like, or my ego's not my amigo. Like, I don't
Uh-huh.
really operate like that. So, to your point, yes, and within my values, it is accountability is a huge part of that. Like, we don't want to ever get into a situation where we can't have an open conversation, because then our employees will never buy in.
Right.
And then we run into situations like we have with, I mean, we're a tech company, so AI is a perfect example. Any kind of tech tool is an example of what we're facing with accountability. People don't want to include people in these dialogues, and then they throw the tools at them and they expect them to say, "Oh, great." But there's no dialogue. You adopted these tools for me on my behalf for me to use, and you want to gauge my performance on them, but I have no idea how to use them. What do they do?
Yeah, and that happens so frequently when decisions are made at a higher level
Right,
without considering the impacts. And again, as
right,
part of that, as part of that accountability conversation, like, if you have conversations early on about expectations, and whether or not there's communication and there's
right,
that agreement, the back
right.
that and that back and forth and the confirmation, that's where you have like, oh well, that doesn't actually work for us, and here's
Right.
why,
Yeah.
before it's too late.
Absolutely. Yeah, which leads into connection, right? And then we talk about connection. This is individual connection to projects, places, what we're doing, but also connection to our teams, connection to our leadership, connection to our company, the values. I mean, it's connection to pretty much the entire project. I would say this is where the actual buy-in would come in to a large extent, or the connection to how would I put, well, you say it. I know what I'm trying to say, but it's connection to the values, right? Like, how do I personally jive to this, right?
The connection is really where your level of engagement, where your level
Right,
of effort, where your level of participation comes in. Because if you're struggling with that, if you don't have a high level of engagement, a high level of connection to the work that you're doing, then it's a lot easier to find all the flaws and the reasons why things won't work. It's
Right.
a lot easier to find all of the challenges or all of the issues that may pop up that can lead you to retreat, that can lead you to not want to innovate, that can lead you to not want to really be a part of feeling more confident. Because if I'm not connected to the work, then it's just work,
Right.
right? And
Right.
there's, it's a fine line, right? You don't want all of your identity to be work, or you don't want to be overly indexed into, you being tied to the work that you do. And the flip side of it is you also need to have some level of connection to the work in order for you to be passionate about it, in order for you to want to grow, in order for you to want to invest that, using the corporate buzzwords, that discretionary effort into the
Right.
work that you're doing, right?
Right.
That comes from connection, that comes from passion, that comes from purpose. And so as you're building, as you're working through this framework, like, yes, how connected am I? How engaged am I? How much
Right.
is the work that I'm doing really impacting, or how much am I impacting the work of the organization? And also not just tied to the results, but am I feeling that back in return as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. And then all we get to the final, the E, which is execution. And this is we tie it all back together, right? And this is the teachable moves, right? This is we put it all into action. We do it can be basically the purpose, right? We're executing the purpose.
That's the with the execution. It's not so much, and if you think about this entire framework that I've been sharing and that we've been discussing, it's not transactional, it's all transformational. And then the
Right.
last piece, that's where the transactions, that's where the tactical pieces come into play. But
Right.
it's only after you've done all the rest of the things first, because then the transactions are easy. Then it's just the to-dos, then it's
Right.
just the steps, then it's just the processes. Like, those are the easy parts, but the hard work is the work that you do on yourself. But yeah, then execution can look a number of different ways. And then the feedback loops that you create as part of that execution. Feedback is so much easier to deliver and receive when you've done kind of all the rest of the work with the framework previously.
Right. Yeah, and it's I would think too this would be an interesting for an organization to kind of take this framework too and not only apply it from a leadership to maybe a team level, but have the team turn it on the leadership as well and apply it the opposite way. Because what I love about it is it's you could do a lot within this framework that is you could do high lift or you could do low lift with it. There's
Mm-hmm.
lower lift activities, that you could do with it. And what I love about it is you can apply it on kind of a high level overview if you wanted to get really into like the granule values and the, organizational, but you could also take it for like a smaller team and really break this down on a smaller level with more like granule tasks, smaller tasks, because
Yeah.
the goal is you don't have to eat the whale in one bite, right?
Right.
And you can actually take this and apply it in smaller motions and then get bigger and bigger with it over time because it is a framework that can expand and sort of evolve out into bigger frameworks or iterations of frameworks, or even fit nicely alongside other types of like behavioral model frameworks and things like that. So it really
Yeah.
ties in nicely, where if a company is not looking to make like a massive overhaul change all at once, because most organizations cannot do that,
Right.
this allows you to kind of go in and say, okay, like we can do this in a relatively easier way that isn't like we have to tear everything apart. But getting back to the values of an
Mm-hmm.
organization, I think we see this common theme as HR practitioners or consultants nowadays, right? That's kind of been the overarching theme we've seen is this organizational values, culture, change management. Companies built on this ladder succession, kind of this archaic model of we have to do things based on stability, the way that we've always done things foundationally. And now we're asking for
Right.
this agility and we're asking for people
Right.
to think outside the box and be more creative and rethink the way we people and rethink the way we
Exactly.
do things at work. And so John, tell us in the last little bit we have here, give us some really amazing tips on Embrace and how we can, or how leadership can incorporate this into their programs at work. I know like habit building is a big one. Getting things in calendars and on, in some sort of routine is a good one. But what are some great tips that we can give leadership and even teams, managers to really start incorporating this if they wanted to today?
Yeah, one of the things, and thank you for teeing that up. One of
Yeah.
the things that I really strived to do when I developed this framework was to make it comprehensive, but also bite sized.
Yeah.
So it can either be the framework or the foundation or the backbone of an entire leadership development program within an
Right.
organization, or it can be a sidecar.
Yeah.
So it really is. If I was leading a team right now, and let's say that I didn't have the time, the bandwidth, the budget to build out an entire leadership development program, I would say, okay, in our weekly meetings for the next 7 weeks, we're going
Right.
to take one piece of the Embrace framework, and we're going to talk about how we can start to implement or focus on it for this week. So let's
Right.
take empathy, right? So
Right.
we're going to start this project with empathy. So, okay, what we want to do is we want to make sure that with everybody who's on our team this week, we want to connect with them on an individual level. We want to either learn something more about them. We want to
Right.
share something about us. We want to start to break down some of the walls that exist
Right.
by showing empathy, right? That's such a simple thing to start
Yeah.
doing. And if we don't know what that is, here's some information, here's some websites, here's a podcast, here's something that we can do to grow our competence in empathy. When it comes to values, having a conversation around that brand
Right.
is like, again, so here's what I want everyone to do this week. I want by the time we come to our meeting next week, I want everyone to really think of and write down 4 words that we think describe us, or things that we would strive to describe us as our individual leadership brand. What we want our legacy to be.
Yeah.
When it comes to even to execution, right? How are we going to implement the things that we have been working on over the past 7 or 8 weeks? So it's really like taking each one of the pieces of the Embrace framework into an individual chunk and kind of working in, and how can we now put action to this? How can we now implement this? How can we be more conscious and aware of this as we go through? And as you work through the framework, you'll recognize the deeper that you get, you're continuing to circle back to the things you've already done, because it does take you step by step by step down
Yeah.
to that final piece.
I love it. And I think too, I think you'll probably agree. I kind of walked through some of this myself and it definitely changed my thinking in the way
Mm.
that I worked because I applied it to a team meeting that I was doing just to
Oh,
see.
nice.
I try to do this with different frameworks. Sorry, team, my team, they're guinea pigs. They don't know it, but they are. But I try to apply different frameworks to my teams and they find out about this stuff on the podcast when they like watch it. So I'm like, "Oh yeah, by the way, you guys are guinea pigs." But I'll
Right.
apply like different frameworks, but they're all great. So, but this framework, like I said, in particular, I love it because it is so approachable. It's so simple for teams. It's simple if you want to use it on an individual basis.
Hmm.
It's even simple. I mean, I don't know if anybody's great at AI, it's really simple to, plug this kind of thing into like AI and say, how can I ask for some tips on this kind of stuff? And
Right.
John, you've got amazing resources on your website as well. I know you do training, you do consulting, teams, organizational training, website, thewinnersedgecoaching.com.
Yes.
And
Thank you.
I'm sure you have workbooks and stuff on there and things as well, resources. Um, but yeah, this is a great topic. Again, imposter syndrome. I think everybody suffers from it in one way or another. We've all had that little
Absolutely.
voice that says not good enough from time to time. Don't listen to it. It's usually lying to you. But
Right.
this has been this has been such a great conversation. And if you have more topics on stuff like this, and I would love to have you back on the show.
I would
But
love that.
this has been so great. And yeah, so the winner's edge coaching.com. And then John, they can find you on LinkedIn. It's Big John Little, right? Is your
Yeah.
LinkedIn Big John Little, but John
Yep.
Little. And then any other plugs? Do you have any podcasts or speaking gigs coming up anytime soon?
I do have a couple speaking gigs, a couple of associations that I'm doing some speaking with. One of the things that I will offer out there to your audience
Yeah.
is I do have a leadership confidence assessment.
Yes.
So it's just 15 quick questions for people to get a sense of how confident they are as leaders, and
Love
also
it.
from an HR lens, when you look at your landscape of your organization, how confident are you in your leadership pipeline? So that's hrlci.scoreapp.com.
Awesome.
And so people can go there. You'll do the 15 quick questions. You get a personalized report based off of that, and then an opportunity to have a debrief conversation with me, and kind of see where that goes. But as you can tell, leadership is a passion of mine, and really helping people to feel confident and authentic in the leadership that they're putting out there in the world. That's really what it's all about for me. So I'm
I
so
love
grateful
it.
for this opportunity, Emily, and would certainly love to have more conversations with you about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you again, John. It was awesome, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. Thanks again for being here, and we look forward to till next time.
Guys, thank you so much.
Okay, that was incredible. John just gave us a masterclass in understanding imposter syndrome, and I'm still processing these massive insights. First, those statistics are staggering. 58% of employees, 68% of women, 73% of Black and brown employees are dealing with imposter syndrome. This isn't a nice to know issue. This is a business critical problem that's impacting your entire organization. Second John's Embrace framework is brilliant because it's simple but not easy. Empathy, mindset, brand, resilience, accountability, connection, execution. Each step builds on the last, and you can implement it one piece at a time in your weekly team meetings. And third, that redefinition of accountability hit me hard. When John said accountability is the highest form of kindness when you have clarity of expectations, communication, and agreement, that's leadership gold right there. Here's my challenge. What voices are you hearing in your head that are telling you that you don't belong? And if you're leading a team, how are you creating psychological safety for people to show up authentically instead of feeling like imposters? Huge thanks to John Little for sharing his expertise and his Embrace framework. You can connect with him at Winner's Edge Coaching. If this conversation sparks something for you, hit subscribe and share this with a leader who needs to hear John's message. The workplace is changing, and it's conversations like this that help us shape that change with empathy and intention. Thanks for listening.